Welcome back to Math Vibes Tutoring, where today we're going to talk about using the quadratic formula to solve quadratic equations. Up until now, I bet you have done some factoring, maybe completing the square, maybe some basic factoring, but today we're going to talk about solving these quadratic equations when we don't factor. Maybe we can't factor. Maybe we don't know how to factor. Maybe we're not sure about the completing the square, all that stuff. Okay, quadratic formula will always work all the time. Now, when I'm talking about the quadratic formula, I need to make sure that we understand that this is only working for quadratic equations. And so if it's a quadratic equations, it's always in this form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So any equation that is in this form, we can use the quadratic formula. Okay, has to be equal to 0, and the biggest exponent must be a power of 2. Okay, so before we start solving using quadratic formula, we actually have to know what that is. I would recommend you writing this down and even memorizing it, because you are going to see this time and time again. This is primarily introduced into Algebra 1, but you'll see it again in Geometry. You see it again in Algebra 2, see it again in Pre-Calc. You just see it a lot of times. So it's very, very important for you to know this formula and what to do with it. Okay? Our formula for the quadratic formula is this. X is equal to, so X is going to be one of your solutions, or two of your solutions, or whatever. Okay? So X is equal to the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, what are we talking about, this a, b, and c stuff? If you remember in that last slide, I told you this is always coming from a quadratic equation. Okay, so when we're talking about this a and b and c stuff, this is what we're talking about. Those coefficients of x squared is your a. The coefficients of that x is your b, and then the constant c, of course, is going to be that number. So these numbers can be positive, they can be negative, but they are going to be actual values. Okay? So let's go ahead and start with a specific problem. Let's go through and make sure we understand what to do with each one of these. Okay? All right, let's move to another page. Okay? So let's check out this particular problem here. We have x squared minus 12x equals negative 20. Okay? Now, first thing we need to check out is this in quadratic standard form? And the answer will be no, because remember, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Here we have it equal to negative 20. So before we start with this quadratic formula, I need to make this equation so that this equation is going to be equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is take that 20, that negative 20, and move it over here. Okay, so how are we going to do that? At this point in the game, Algebra 1, Algebra 2, you know what to do. We're going to add 20 to both sides. So what we have is x squared minus 12x plus 20 equals 0. Okay, so I just moved that negative 20 over to the other side of the equal sign using the inverse operations. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at our formula. So remember the formula. X is equal to the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Let's go ahead and evaluate what a, b, and c would be. A is 1. Okay, there's a 1 right there. Okay, b is negative 12. Okay, so a is 1, b is negative 12. Notice I kept that sign. And c is a positive 20. Okay, so we're going to go through and put this stuff into our equation. So if b is negative 12, okay, and the formula says the opposite of b. So the opposite of negative 12 will be positive 12, okay? So this is positive 12 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Let's talk about that, b squared. Well, if b is negative 12, then negative 12 squared is negative 12 times negative 12, which is 144. Okay? Minus 4 times whatever a is times whatever C is, which is 20. And again, all of this is over 2 times whatever A is. Okay? So what we're doing now is just working through that quadratic formula in order to find this equation or these solutions. So what we have now is 12 plus or minus the square root of. Okay, so let's check this out. Okay, so I have the 144. Okay, and then I have negative 4 times 1, which is negative 4, and negative 4 times 20, which would be negative 80. Okay, so negative 80. So what I have, I'm going to write it here over to the side so you can see. This will be 144 minus 80. Okay, 144 minus 80. That's 64. Okay, so up under this radical is 64 all over 2, because 2 times 1 is 2. Now, do we know what the square root of 64 is? Yep, we do. Okay, the square root of 64 is 8. I'm going to put this over to the side because I'm going to run out of room, but I want to make sure that I get there. In fact, let me just go to another slide. That'll be easier. So what we have is negative 12 plus or minus the square root of 64 over 2. Okay, we use quadratic formula. We plugged in our A, B, and C here. And here we just evaluated all the parts that we substituted A, B, and C. And I'm just simplifying here. Okay, I move on. I'm going to continue this. So x is equal to negative 12 plus or minus the square root of, or was that positive 12? I'm sorry. Okay. Plus or minus the square root of 64 over 2. Okay. Now, this whole plus or minus stuff, this stuff right here, what that means is we're going to do 1 with plus the square root of 64 and 1 with minus the square root of 64. Okay. And again, we know what that is. That is 8. So this is really 12 plus or minus 8 over 2. Okay. More specifically, x equals 12 plus 8 over 2. X equals 12 minus 8 over 2. That's what the plus or minus stuff means. Okay? So what we're going to do now is go ahead and evaluate this. So 12 plus 8 is 20. 20 divided by 2 is 10. So here, x could be equal to 10. All right? Over here on the other side right here, this part right here, let's see, 12 minus 8 is 4. Okay, over 2, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So x could be equal to 2. Okay, so let's just kind of recap what we've just got through doing. Other page, because I ran out of room. I know what the square root of 64 is. It's 8. Okay, so 12 plus or minus 8 divided by 2, and then we just simplify. Okay, all right, let's look at one more example. Okay, let's check this one out. Let's do this one. Let's see if we can find another good one to do. All right, so let's do this one. This is a different color. 3x squared plus 5x minus 12 is equal to 0. We are ready to rock and roll right here because it's already equal to 0. Okay, see, it's already equal to 0. I don't have to move anything around. And it is quadratic. Biggest exponent is 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and evaluate and talk about what's our A, B, and C. So A would be 3. B would be 5. C would be negative 12. All right, let's plug it into our formula. Okay, that formula, same thing, and I write it down every single time. X is the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? All right, let's plug it in. So x equals the opposite of b. Well, if b is positive 5, the opposite will be negative 5. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Okay, if b is 5, then b squared would be 5 squared. 5 times 5 is 25. Minus 4 times whatever a is times whatever c is. Okay, so all I am doing is just substituting everything into our equation. Okay, all right, after I've done that, now let's clean it up. Let's keep on moving and evaluating this. So we have negative 5 plus or minus. Okay, so I still got my 25, but let's check out this other stuff. All right, so I have negative 4 times 3 times negative 12. Negative 4 times 3 is negative 12. Negative 12 times negative 12 is a positive 144. Okay, and then all over 2 times 3, which is 6. Okay, and what I'm going to do over here to the side, I'm just going to clean this up a bit so you can see it over here to the side. So this is negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 169. Okay, because 25 and 144 is 169 all over 6. Okay. Okay, keeping it moving here, I still have that negative 5 plus or minus. Do we know what the square root of 169 is? We sure do. We do. It's 13. The square root of 169 is 13 over 6. Okay? So let's kind of break this down a little bit more. Let's see. So what are we saying here? We're saying that x is equal to negative 5 plus 13 over 6. And we're also saying that x is equal to negative 5 minus 13 over 6. Okay? So, all right, if that's the case, then negative 5 plus 13, what is negative 5 plus 13? That is 8 over 6. And let's reduce that to be 4 over 3. So x is going to be 4 over 3. And then on the other side, x is equal to negative 5 minus 13 over 6. All right, negative 5 minus 13 is negative 18. Divide that by 6. So x is going to be equal to negative 3. Okay, so here x is equal to 4/3 and x is equal to negative 3. Those are your two solutions. So those are two problems to kind of help you get your feet wet with solving quadratic equations with the quadratic formula. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment box. Also, make sure you subscribe to my channel. Any other questions, shoot me an email, mathvibestutoring@gmail.com. Have a wonderful day.